to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marisa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. And on this occasion, the Doin' Time show is actually doing the show remotely. Obviously, we are still in the middle of a pandemic and there have been some restrictions eased and we'll just have to see how we go. First up on the show, we're going to be speaking with Brett Colins from Justice Action. And Brett has done some wonderful work with Justice Action in New South Wales, and he founded that organisation, I believe. And we're going to be speaking with him about mental health issues and detention and also forced medication of people experiencing mental health issues. So that's first up. And then after that, we'll be speaking with Senior Lawyer Kieran Pender on the proposed new online surveillance laws. And Kieran is actually from the Human Rights Law Centre. And then at 4:30, we're going to be speaking with Uncle Stan. And Uncle Stan will be speaking with us about a prison island. And it was a penal settlement, I believe. And it's called Rottnest Island. And there were actually prisoners on that island. And we were meant to speak to him last week and we had some technical difficulties. So he's very kindly agreed to come back and talk about that and talk about some of the genocide and atrocities and violation of human rights that happened with Aboriginal prisoners. But first up, we have Brett Colins, and welcome to the program.
Yes, good afternoon, Marisa.
It's lovely to have you, Brett. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has been, but we're pumping up. We've got a nice team of people working every day, so we haven't slowed down here, that's for sure. And there will be obligations.
Sure not. Brett, can you talk to us about what's happening with Justice Action and what's happening in the area of mental health?
Yes, look, absolutely. The issue of mental health is a vexed one. It really is a hard one because you hear all these kindly, and I use the word carefully with inverted commas, kindly people who talk about ensuring that all these poor mentally ill people who are in prison, that they should be treated better. But we have found that the moment they talk in those terms, what they're really talking about is they're talking about medicating people and forcibly medicating people if they aren't prepared to accept medications at a course. So you have all these people who, mostly who are represented in prisons, as everyone knows, 14, 15 times the rate of imprisonment for Aboriginal people. The result of the medical or mental health intervention into prisons will be a lot more Aboriginal people will end up being medicated and forced medicated. So we did an inspection of a prison here in New South Wales about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and in the mental health area there, every single person was forcibly medicated. There's one person who wasn't, but then when we had a discussion, a meeting with them, they actually all put their head down. We asked them, could you refuse the medication they're giving you? They put their head down and shook their heads. I've had a discussion actually just only last week with a man who's down in Fulham prison. He's in a high security area down there, and he asked one of his mates, "Listen, mate, would you rather have 5 years less of your sentence and not be medicated?" He said, "I would rather not be medicated." What
do you mean? Can you just explain that a little bit further and give an example? So, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, absolutely. See, medication is one of those issues where you stagger around and like a zombie. The side effects of the antipsychotic medication is not just short-term, it's long-term, and people are required over a long period to continue it. So you have things like, the side effects are you get a big belly, you want to sleep all the time, lie down, you've lost all the energy, you get things like, you've got heart problems as well, diabetes is almost like a side effect. And the medical profession as a whole just says, there are some side effects, and they go, but And so this is a continual position. So they're saying, look, it's safer for whom? Oh, well, safer for the community if you walk around like a zombie. And so there's this real pressure on people to exceed medication rather than to be like a fully fledged human being. And they can often be in a situation where they actually have a lesser sentence. So you can say, okay, well, if you're under a section, and there are a number of sections of, whether it's Victoria or whatever state it is, number of sections where they can just shunt you sideways into a mental health ward, and you think as though you're getting off, but you're not getting off at all, because you end up staggering out of the hospital area, being required to be medicated, and if you don't turn up for your injection once a month, then they send the police around. So it's a really big issue, and one in which we've been fully grappling now, because we see it as being very much a prison issue, and we look very carefully at people who say, oh, well, these poor mentally ill people went, yeah, well, what are you going to do with them? Right? And what we always know, right, without a question, after long periods of discussion, that they're always talking about medication, and that doesn't work at all for prisoners, does not.
So you're saying then that they're sent to hospitals or institutions to serve out the rest of their sentence. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in fact, look, we can tell you, I'm talking particularly here in New South Wales, but in Victoria, I had a discussion with a man who's in Victoria at the moment in Fulham, and he spoke to the guy beside him. He said this guy's staggers around the place. He said, Frankie, come over here and let me have a word with you. He said, Frankie, would you rather have your medication, which they're giving you now, or would you rather have 5 years off your sentence? Right? Or would you rather not have the medication? He said, I'd rather not have the medication.
And can you direct listeners to a report that's been compiled by Justice Action or by the government where they can read up on this stuff?
Sorry, I missed that first question, Marisa.
Sorry, can you direct listeners to a report where...
Yep, absolutely. Well, look, on our website, we've done a lot of work around forced medication. Actually, the laws are quite clear. Yes. So we've been dealing carefully with the people who are the mental health consumers. So people who are not charged with offences, who aren't held in jails, but are actually held in inverted commas, involuntary facilities inside the hospital areas. Or else they're held, allowed out in the community, but they have to turn up once a month for their injection. So all that material is on our Justice Action website. So anyone who's doing some research, if they want to go to the pull-down menu, mental, and the pull-down menu, mental, and then forced medication is an index page coming off that, and we have a body of work behind that. A lot of material, and we actually had a case just last week where we were in front of the Canterbury Mental Health Service, and we were beside this Indian extraction man, and he was accused of nothing. He wasn't. He just at some stage he was concerned, depressed, and they had him now for the last 2 or maybe 3 years on a community treatment order, and we stood beside him and we're calling him to account to look at his file and to see where the legal justification is for doing it, because it's not there. And they tend to bully people into accepting medication or entice them as though it's a benefit for them. Not
there doesn't seem to be much of an understanding, and it appears really that the criminal justice system and it impacts quite a lot on people experiencing mental health. And
absolutely.
Also, Brett, can you comment on the Royal Commission? What's happening? Do you think that the Royal Commission would be a useful tool?
Well, yes and no. I mean, what they're hearing a lot from the professionals in the area. So we're hearing a lot of comments, and we're hearing a lot of sympathy once again for people who are held in institutions and who aren't getting access to a whole lot of stuff. But what we're also finding is that the alternative ways of handling people who have issues, and a lot of people have got social issues, that those alternative ways are not there. So we haven't heard properly argued, and we'll be presenting as part of our argument, is that the need for community support, with supported accommodation, peer mentoring, people around them, and also access to services inside the prison themselves. All those things are basic. You can't just throw a person out the streets and don't give them a home they can go to. You must have something to replace the prison, which is at least where you are in charge yourself and you can have food and you have access to a job. No, a job. training for a job.
Absolutely. There really isn't all that much support. And I know we were talking off air about Miriam. Can you talk to listeners briefly about her?
Oh, look, absolutely. Look, Miriam Merton's case is the case. Well, in some ways, everyone accepts that actually her treatment, Miriam Merton up at Lismore-based hospital a few years ago now, was reflected on the whole of the mental health service here in New South Wales, but also is the same Australia-wide. And what Miriam Merton was, a woman 60-odd years old, mother of two young daughters, and whom they knew. And she walked into the hospital. They held her in seclusion inside an area where she was stripped naked. She had been accused of nothing. All she was distressed. And they said, well, and she was defecating. She had no control of her bowels, and she was also hitting her head against the walls. Now, the nurse engaged and other people engaged in the ward, they just let her stagger around, fall over, and hit her head on the floor, on the ground. And all they did was nonchalantly mop the floor of the blood and the pieces on the floor and ignored her entirely. When she died, they then lied to her daughters. And it was only when the inquest threw up CCTV footage and showed them, everybody, what happened, that people went, hang on. How could you have such callous behaviour with a woman who's so distraught? And we had all these, then the ministers came in and all said, oh, this is appalling. The daughters, they were just so angry, and they made sure that the media saw exactly what happened. They saw how their mother was treated, and the response of that was they said they'd have a root and branch a stripping of the mental health system here in New South Wales. They'd changed things, they said. They had 2 inquiries, and at the end of it, they said they'd do things and did nothing.
Yeah, see, I wanted you to. That's really fantastic that you were able to talk about that. Brett, we're nearing the end of the interview because I've got 2 others to get through. Are there any final comments you wanted to make?
Well, look, I guess a couple of things, really. I mean, we're not only in the mental health area. Most importantly, most of the people inside prison aren't in the mental health space. So things like we're concerned about human rights. So there's just now there are 2 changes happening around this United Nations Convention Against Torture called OPCAT. So there's some things coming in that they're quite useful. We're concerned that it's going to be real. So we want to make sure that there will be things like, for example, solitary confinement should be ended. Right? And strip searching of women prisoners should be ended. The 2 things straight away which are causing unnecessary distress, which is a part of the Convention Against Torture. And the other thing we're doing is working very strongly behind this national database of deaths in custody, because there's some things that change in there. We're looking for a national database with feedback from the affected authorities. We're trying to define that really carefully. So it goes on. Heaps and heaps of work.
So the database on deaths in custody, I'll have to get you back on the show to talk about that, because that would be quite an involved topic. And I may actually get you back on in the lead-up, because we're actually preparing a memorial show for Uncle Ray Jackson in April, so I might get you back before that to talk about that.
Okay, love to talk with you about it. Very important, and so we're getting some support from the coroners, and that there's some things that can happen that will improve the way they follow up and make sure people don't die in the way they have in the past. So that'll be it's all very important.
It is extremely. So that's a number of organisations that are working on that, including Justice Action?
Well, yes, we're linking up with other organisations. I mean, what we are trying to do most of all is, of course, the coroners and also the Attorney General, right, to change the rules. So when something happens in one state, in Victoria, for example, then the state of Western Australia should have the same recommendations should apply. If the same situation applies,
absolutely,
it should also should have feedback from Western Australia to a coroner's statement in Victoria. There are things that are natural, things that should happen, and they haven't been. So that's the sort of pressure we're putting on government at the moment.
We'll have to get talking about that. Well, thank you so much, Brett, for coming onto the program, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Marisa. Lovely to speak to you guys. Well done.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And that was Brett Colins from Justice Action, and we're now going to go into an announcement.
We've got a common enemy. The same government that locks up these refugees just behind us here at the Park Hotel is the same government that's going for our rights, trying to attack the very limited gains that casuals have And so when union activists take up the cause of refugees amongst their fellow workers, it's not an act of charity. It's about building workers' united self-defence mechanism, understanding that we're all part of the same battle.
Subscribe to 3CR in 2021. Feed Radical Radio. Subscribe today. Go to 3cr.org.au/subscribe or call the station on 94198377.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and it's approximately 4:15, and we're going to be speaking now with Senior Lawyer Kieran Pender from the Human Rights Law Centre, and we're speaking to him about some dangerous new surveillance law that's being proposed. The Human Rights Law Centre has expressed alarm about an expansive new law proposed by Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton. Hello, Kieran. Welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's lovely to have you. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's happening with this law and some of the work that the Human Rights Law Centre is doing and how the law was actually invented?
Sure. Just before Christmas, Minister Dutton introduced into Parliament a new surveillance bill which will represent yet another increase of the Australian law enforcement and intelligence capacity to spy on everyday Australians. The Human Rights Law Centre is really concerned about this bill. It's called the Surveillance Legislation Amendment Identify and Disrupt Bill that gives the AFP ever-increasing powers to spy on everyday Australians. So
would you say then that the powers would be given to federal police and that they're invasive?
Yeah, they're certainly invasive. So this proposed law gives the police the ability to seek 3 new types of online surveillance warrants. One would allow the police to access data on computers. One would allow them to monitor online activity, and a third would allow them to take over anyone's online account. Now, when the minister introduced these laws, he talked about safeguards, he talked about thresholds, this only applying to the highest category of criminal activity, and the Human Rights Law Centre has looked at the bill, and none of those promises are met in the actual law that's being proposed. So there's a real gulf between what is being said and what this law, if it's enacted by Parliament, would actually allow the federal police to do.
It's interesting because from what I'm just having a look at the media release here that was put out by the Human Rights Law Centre. And basically, is it true then that the Surveillance Law Legislation Amendment Identify and Disrupt Bill 2020 was introduced to Parliament in December, wasn't it? Yep. And they were stating that the new powers were intending to help tackle serious crime. I fail to see how that could actually happen, or if indeed other minority groups like activists and Aboriginal people would perhaps be impacted?
That's exactly one of our primary concerns. Surveillance capacity of the state should be extremely limited. It should be properly justified and carefully contained. And we think that these new powers being proposed meet none of those thresholds. And we're concerned, as you say, that these laws will have a chilling effect on free speech and on political activity and could disproportionately impact marginalised and vulnerable groups. You mentioned protest groups, whistleblowers, journalists, people going about important activities that uphold Australian democracy will be potentially their activities will be threatened or limited or chilled by these increasing surveillance powers being given to the state.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very toxic actually. And in fact, I spent a period in America, and this sounds terribly very much like the Patriot Act over there, where online accounts were being monitored, and you also had helicopters that were flying over the homes of particular activists. I'm not sure whether you remember Operation Backfire, where environmental activists were actually swept up and accused of domestic and eco-terrorism?
Yeah, it's that's one example of the risks that are posed by expansive surveillance powers, and that's just we've really been on a one-way journey. Unfortunately, in the past 20 years, the Parliament and the government continue to introduce broader and broader, more and more expansive surveillance laws without giving the evidence for why they're strictly necessary to address legitimate concerns, and without the proper safeguards and proportionality in applying these sweeping draconian laws to everyday Australians.
Yeah, so really in practice, Kieran, that means that people's emails would be looked at, wouldn't it? Internet, any online accounts that they've got with banking or where they're going, yes?
That's certainly a risk. So to take, for example, the network activity warrant, that enables the AFP to get a warrant to monitor online activity in relation to certain offences, and really that's any criminal offence above 3 years maximum imprisonment. But it's very expansive in who you can then monitor. And so, for example, on one reading of that provision in this new bill, if someone suspected of a relevant offence is on WhatsApp, in theory under this bill, any Australian who's using WhatsApp could be monitored. Now, the government may say that's an expansive interpretation or a drafting error, but this is the bill that's been put to Parliament for Australians to scrutinise, and we say it's far too broad for its stated intent.
Absolutely, Kieran. And what is most concerning and troubling here is that this information or data that is being used would be used from these online accounts. Most people wouldn't actually be committing a crime, and the bill could go perhaps so far as to have people say, oh, well, they were going to commit that crime.
Certainly. So in Australian law, there's a really important principle called the freedom from self-incrimination. So Australians can't be compelled to give up information that's prejudicial to them in terms of criminal accusations. So, for example, if the police come to your door with a search warrant, yes, you've got to open the door, but you don't have to help them search. We're worried that one part of this bill that enables the police to get assistance orders to force people to assist with the execution of these new warrants doesn't have adequate safeguards for that freedom. And we could see Australians being locked up to 10 years for not assisting in the execution of these warrants when, in doing so, they're protecting or seeking to protect their freedom from self-incrimination. And, of course, that doesn't only apply to people who are accused of offences under this law, but also, third parties, people who may have other material, who may, for very legitimate reasons, be concerned about assisting police and now told either help us or go to jail for 10 years.
Yes, there's already enough laws that have been enacted to tackle serious crime, and we've already seen, haven't we, the way that ABC journalists have been treated?
Exactly, and this is part of a broader point, which is a trend towards a secret state, an opaque state, where the press are raided, where whistleblowers are being prosecuted and surveillance powers are being expanded. At the Human Rights Law Centre, we believe all of these issues have a really negative impact on the strength of Australian democracy, and that it's really important that we fight each of them, but then also see this as part of a bigger picture. These new surveillance powers are not being proposed in isolation, but as part of that broader picture of state surveillance and opacity and a lack of transparency in Australian government.
I find it really interesting that this is happening during the pandemic.
Yes, and certainly the pandemic has given rise to many concerns about surveillance and data. And of course, for some of that, it's very legitimate, requirements, for example, to log in to an app to, assist with contract tracing. But in any surveillance law, there needs to be appropriate safeguards. And we say in this new bill that's been proposed by Minister Dutton, those safeguards are severely lacking.
So what could the Morrison government do differently? How could he ensure that there are robust safeguards to minimise the adverse impact of new surveillance powers?
Sure, that's a great question. So this bill is currently before the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, and the Human Rights Law Centre has made a submission and will be appearing on Wednesday week to lay out some of those recommendations. I mean, I think the first point is we don't need new surveillance capacity, and to the extent it is needed, we want to see the evidence for that. But then at a technical level, there are many changes that need to be made to this bill to make it justified, proportionate and with sufficient safeguards. So we call on the Morrison government and Minister Dutton to withdraw this bill, go back to the drawing board, consult adequately with relevant stakeholders, and then come back with potentially with a much narrower version of the law.
Absolutely, and and I think you described the three warrants, didn't you, just before?
Yes.
About police. And that it's really quite disturbing, Kieran.
Yes, well, certainly we are very concerned about it. We think it erodes the democratic freedoms of Australians, and so the Human Rights Law Centre will be doing all we can to try and ensure that our concerns are listened to and enacted. And
when is that being debated, the bill?
It's before this committee, a very important parliamentary committee with oversight of intelligence powers and issues. It's being heard by that committee not this Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. The committee will make a recommendation and report as to how the bill should proceed, and hopefully some of our concerns will be listened to and dealt with by the government.
And you think the bill will pass in some form?
I wouldn't like to speculate, and we have to hope that these legitimate and important and compelling concerns are listened to. But I think if you look at past history, unfortunately, too often surveillance bills are being rushed through Parliament with bipartisan support under the guise of concerns about national security, for example. We really think that we need, for any surveillance capacity that's going to impact everyday Australians and their democratic rights, we need robust scrutiny, independent monitoring and checks and balances that are absent from this bill and absent from many of the other laws that have already passed Parliament in the last decade or so.
Absolutely. No, this is even worse than ever, because I was just having a look here that, the bill also enables police to seek an assistance order in conjunction with any of the three new warrants. And what does that basically mean?
So that would enable the police to require anyone to help in the execution of those warrants, either the person who is the suspect or third parties. If someone is a suspect and they have a job, maybe the employer would be forced to provide assistance. A narrow assistance order is in keeping with broad, criminal procedure. If a policeman comes to your door, you're supposed to, with a warrant, you're required to open it. But we think these assistance orders are far broader than is ordinary and reasonable, and we need proper safeguards. And how can people get access to the submission that the Human Rights Law Centre if you go to the HRLC website, Human Rights Law Centre website, you'll see the media release and the submission. And as I said, we'll be appearing in Parliament on Wednesday week, along with other civil society stakeholders, to talk about these issues to the Joint Committee. Thank you so much. And finally, I wonder, and this is just a quick comment, Kieran, I wonder if this is actually going to be, if the bill goes ahead, which I hope it doesn't, where they're going to introduce grand juries. You know how there wouldn't be a fair trial. Certainly, those concerns about the robustness of our criminal system in dealing with issues of national security are acute concern to the Human Rights Law Centre. We see with the prosecution, for example, of Bernard Collaery, witness K, in regards to Australia spying on Timor-Leste, or David McBride in regards to war crimes in Afghanistan, secrecy law and national security law being used to shroud compellingly important prosecutions, prosecutions that raise compelling important issues and questions about whether the prosecutions are appropriate being shrouded in secrecy. And so this is just another example of the expanse of Australia's surveillance and secrecy state. Let's hope not. We'll try our best. Thank you so much, Kieran, for coming onto the program, and I'm sure we'll be having you back very soon. Thanks a lot. Great. Thanks very much for your time. Take care.
As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dare.
Hi, this is Renata from the IWG Collective. We're calling feminists of all genders and feminist allies. March 8th is International Women's Day, and this year it's special as it's also Labor Day in Victoria and a public holiday. This year's rally and march will kick off at 2 p.m. at the steps of Parliament House, and then we'll make our way through the CBD to the State Library. Come early and be part of a momentous event. There will also be a limited after party at the Queen Victoria Women's Centre. See you there.
A 3CR supporter.
As we come marching, marching, we're standing proud and tall. The rising of the women means the rising of us all. Well, it's the PR boy from Palm Island.
Hi, my name is Lex Wharton and I listen to 3CR and I hope you do too. I hope that you could support 3CR in its radiothon because 3CR supports the fight for communities and support in all areas of struggles. So please listen to 3CR.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, 3CR Community Radio, and we just spoke earlier with Kieran Pender about some very alarming surveillance bills that could be introduced. And next up, we've got Uncle Stan, who we tried to interview last week, and there was very bad reception. He was in a remote area, and we're going to be speaking to him about a prison island with Aboriginal people and looking at some history there. Hello, Uncle. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Maureen.
It's really good to have you. Now, Uncle Stan, last week was a bit crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was about 112 k's north of Perth, and it was on the beach, a little settlement on the beach there, and I couldn't get through the reception properly.
That's okay. It's all good. All right, so can you maybe give a quick introduction about, really what I know you're in WA, but what is if you like, the country that the land that your ancestors come from and yourself?
Along the southwest, like north of Perth, and it heads down towards the southwest, is the hills, what we call the Moro, and for about 20 k's. It's 20 k's inland, about 15 to 20 k's inland, and that's where the ocean was up about 600 to 800 years ago, 800,000 years ago. And then it receded out way out past Rottnest, and the land was way out there. And during those years, up until 7,000 years ago, when the ocean started coming up again, it was there's evidence there of human occupation, and then that was 7,500 years, 7,650,000 years ago. That's when the oceans receded up to where Fremantle is now, what is the coast now. So Rottnest was cut off, and inland. Down south towards the further south of Perth, it's pretty flat all the way. You could tell it was just ocean because of the flatness. Yeah. And it's still. So Perth.
Yeah.
Perth is mainly all the north and south of Perth and all around the city was mainly wetlands and swamps and fresh water, and there was abundance of wildlife and feed. There was that much feed there. The Jungards and all the Southwest Aborigines lived like kings, if you like, because there was an abundance of food until the settlement, until the white man came.
Okay.
Taken away.
So, are you what land within the Noongar Nation are you from?
I'm from my grandmother. My dad's mother is the Wadjemup. From the Wadjemup area, which is the Perth area, from Pinjarra south to and up north, Moora north, which is about 180 kilometres north of Perth. Pinjarra is about 80 kilometres south of Perth, and into the hills is all the Wadjemup area.
Okay.
And there were 3 different tribes, 3 different chiefs who ran the 3 different areas in north of the city, or north of the river, south of the river, and east of the river.
Right. So, Uncle Stan, how did you get to hear about Rottnest Island? I believe you're on the board there, and can you tell us a little bit about the background there and what happened?
Well, as I was growing up, I started with Len Colbung was the director of Aboriginal Legal Aid then, and I started. I was more or less the designated driver at one little stage there, and then I went on from there. And Len introduced me. I was still a young man, and Len introduced me to all that sort of stuff and all the meetings, and I've been going to meetings ever since.
Yeah. Okay. So with the Rottnest Island, when did that happen? So obviously that happened in 1829, did it? What happened? Can you just describe what it is?
Well, Rottnest Prison Island, it was officially a penal colony from, or an island from prison, from about 1838 till about 1931, and people in the early stages, they were just around from the Perth area, and then then they started bringing them from York area, which is about 80 k's east of Perth, and all the way down to Albany, and all the southern towns through from Perth to Albany, and then they started bringing them in further from afield, like Esperance, Kalgoorlie, through the goldfields, and then through up to the Murchison, Gelton and Murchison, and then they started bringing them all down from the Kimberleys and Pilbara, and they started just for anything, for spearing sheep or protecting their women from the white man, and they put it down as assault. So they were interned there for up to 7 years, or sometimes the locals were interned for 1 year for. That was in the first lot. Were interned just for stealing, because during the 30s, when the settlers, more and more settlers came to Perth, they all the food sources were either all the kangaroos and emus and all the wildlife were either eaten by the white man, and the land was cleared to make way for farm huts and houses and the white man's settlement living things. Anyway, and then they say that the blackfellow, he couldn't go too far south from the river, because that was an alien land. He wasn't allowed to go to. You're not allowed to go to other people's areas. And north of the Swan River and east of the Swan River, and because there was hardly any food left, the stocks were all whittled out by the white man. Well, they started spearing sheep and robbing from the white man and breaking into their house and pinching flour and whatever. And they were incarcerated on Rottnest for that for at least a year or more.
Oh. Yeah. Well, Uncle, I think from what I've seen here, it was 3 years after settlement that everything was taken, all the medicinal plants and the traditional vegetation.
Well, at the top of what is the Perth city now, you've got St George's Terrace, and then up to Murray Street, or over to Murray Street, and Hay Street's in the middle, right along the top. Well, that was all bush and pure water there, with a lot of the tribes used to come and meet and live, and then they go down the other side of the river, or it was where Harrison Island is now, which is what we called Madagarra. That's where there was 4 little islands there, like about 20, 40, 50, 100 square metres around or whatever. Anyway, that's where the crossing was. It was shallow.
Yeah.
And they like all around Australia, really, they were going from place to place, and let the area revegetate and then come back next season.
So, Uncle, I think, is it fair to say then, because of the dwindling food supply, that's how this awful prison was born in a way, because the Aboriginal men were really just trying to get food. They were shooting cows and chickens, and so then they were arrested for theft and put in this awful prison.
Yeah, and well, when the prisoners on Rottnest, when they were taken over there, some of them were in chains and walked for 700 kilometres or whatever. So they aren't official figures. All official figures, all the figures here aren't official, And so, like they say, there's 367 or whatever buried, but there's probably a lot more. And they're all unmarked graves. None of them was ever marked or named, or the names were ever put down. And a lot of the names were all, weren't even their proper names, because the white man's ears are deaf to the pronunciation of, or the language of the Aboriginal, because they couldn't understand what they were saying properly, because of the language, how to pronounce, the pronunciation, I mean. And you got some names, like you got one bloke, his name was Ginjamara Jack, and then another name was Jinjamara or Jurgamara, and there's a lot of blokes like that. They're all different names because the spelling was wrong, or the letters look like another letter. Like, U look like a W, or a W look like an M.
I think what you're trying to say is that there was a lot of language barriers.
Yes, that's right, between the whites, or the settlers, because of their lack of understanding and the ignorancy of understanding anything like of the language, and some, like, they got a number of how many incarcerations there were, but sometimes there was people some prisoners would come back like with a different spelling of their name or another name altogether. And
it's quite disgusting.
He's probably done 3 or 4 stints at Rottnest, and probably some of them have done up to 7.
It's really terrible, because I think from what I can gather here, it looked as if at first the Aboriginal people were allowed to hunt, and then the men were actually made to build the prison on the island and were worked ruthlessly in the heat and chained and inadequately clothed, isn't it? And even chained at night and whipped.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the first 6 prisoners that were over there were chained to a tree, and they slept at night in a little cave right on the beach there, and then they burnt the tree down. They ended up burning the tree down and stole the only little boat on there and headed back to shore. But they got caught again and sent back.
And I believe now. So what are the consequences with now? I mean, what's the board actually trying to do now? The one you're on, Uncle?
We've got a meeting of elders now, or another meeting coming up. But we've got this. We've got our own board of three of the boys. We started off. There's seven of us, or about 10 altogether, and there's 7 official committee men. We're trying to get Rottnest. We're trying to get the government to do something for Aboriginals, for the Nyungar people, Wadjemup people, or even from the statewide, really, because there's a lot of them from up there, to do something for us, not just European, because there's nothing over there for Aboriginals over there. The Nyungars, or anyone Aboriginal go over there, there's nothing Aboriginal about the island, except for where they've put signs around for the tent land where the burials are, or what is called where the burials are now. And,
so is Rottnest Island now a tourist destination, is it?
It has been for
in the past
80 years or whatever. And
now?
Back in the First World War, they interned a lot of the Austrians and Germans over there, and in the Second World, and the Croatians, Dalmatia, and all them. They were all part of Austria, realm of Austria. Anyway, and they were all over there as prisoners during the war. And the Second World War, they had all Italians over there, and a lot of them were helping to build too. To help the Aboriginals how to build.
I think what I'm trying to communicate to listeners here is that there was incarceration on Rottnest Island, and it was pretty awful, wasn't it? What was happening? You know, they were being chained. But now, what I'm trying to say is, what has that island become?
It's just become a lot of mecca for the rich, mainly. They've just building the great. They knocked down half the great big hotel there, and they've got the millions. They're spending millions and millions of dollars on revamping it, and they built on the south side. They rebuilt all the great big. They doubled the size of the hotel, and for the mega rich or the rich, and Karma, which is they've got they're Australia wide, worldwide. I think they're owned by Indians, and they've got the other hotel there, and a lot of it. There is in the museum is just reopened, revamped, and they've got myself and a few others voiceovers and that about the island. You know, the little bits about the island in the museum with the big screens and that there. Showing,
I mean, the thing is, Uncle,
that's all there is. Yeah, that's all.
From what you've been saying, there appears to be absolutely no recognition. I mean, I think there was a short program on ABC at one stage, but no recognition of the atrocities that happened on Rottnest Island.
The government,
the overcrowding, the disease,
Yes, there was big outbreaks in the 1800s, and before that, a couple of big breakouts of measles, and a lot of them died of influenza from the flu.
Yeah. And
two blokes were working out in the hot sun because they had their heads shaved, and they got sunstruck, and they ended up dying through that. And that was just that's only just a little tiny drop in the water, a bucket of water, of what really happened over there. And Mr. Vincent, Henry Vincent, he was a real cool bloke. Governor Hutt went over there on inspection and said that you told him to stop using the cat o' nine tails. He said the normal little lash is quite sufficient enough. But I don't think he that went unheeded. And he was very cruel, Henry Vincent.
Extremely.
Yeah, the water.
It's really bad. I mean, I think the thing that I also found really, really terrifying as well in reading up on all this is looking at how during that time with the prison that Aboriginal people faced a legal system they didn't understand, and then they were sent on boats down to Fremantle, and the men from the inland language groups were scared of the ocean, which is completely foreign. I mean, how are these white settlers totally ignorant, not even understanding about the cultural stuff or what goes on? They're not really making an effort.
Well, I've worked with a lot of them up the mines up north. I've been up and down there for a few years, and they're still the same. They're very ignorant. Or when I was like at some of those places up north, beautiful land. You know what it's like up there. It's so beautiful, that land up there. But a lot of them, white people from Sydney who I was working with, a lot of them, they just looked at that land as if, oh, look at this all shitty rock, and oh, look at this bloody dust, and look at that stupid looking landscape and all this. They just didn't have no idea. No idea at all at how beautiful that country is, the whole of Australia is. They got no idea. Very ignorant.
Unfortunately, it's about corporate greed and mining and land grab.
Yep, that's all it is. Yep. And in the beginning of the 1900s, they wanted to turn it into a tourist mecca, but they knocked it on the head. The government knocked it on the head, and then they kept the prisoners there for another 30 years. So that's when that officially became officially became a non-penal colony then. That's when a lot of like in the 1915 during the war there, some of the women, the blokes were taken off because they were fraternising with the women there. So that would have been the European prisoners that would help building.
But honestly, Uncle, can you imagine the energy down there. I mean, obviously with Rottnest Island now, with all that history with the prisoners that was happening, and apparently from what I've been reading here, there are testimonies of people that when they go camping there, they become ill.
Yeah, and even like our own fellas here, sometimes if they don't do the right things, they get sick, and the white fellas think it's something to do with some kind of normal health, but they do not believe nothing about Aboriginal deadly stuff like that. You know, they cannot comprehend it. They got no idea. I don't bother explaining it to any white people because it just goes from one ear and out the other, and they look at you like as if you're talking, out of your bum.
But people need to know. This is why I invited you onto the show, Uncle Stan, because it's really important for people to understand about the genocide and about how Aboriginal people were treated on not just Rottnest Island, but incarceration. And
well, one of my visits over there, I went down to where this holding big shed is on the south of the township there, and they got a big concrete slab thing there with a hole at one end where the blood, where they used to put them in the morgue, and the blood that was the hole, which was about 3 inches. That was where the blood used to drain out. So
the what? Sorry, the blood. The blood.
Blood. Yeah, when they used to have them on the slab in the morgue, they used to wash all the residue, all the blood, and stick it down a hole. It used to go down a hole at the end of the big concrete slab. And
seriously, Uncle, you know what this sounds? I know, it's bad. You know what this? It sounds like the Holocaust all over again.
Well, yeah. And a lot of them will walk naked from Esperance all the way to Albany, naked, with a bit of lap or whatever. And when they got there, they given them some bit of clothes. And some of the rugs on Rottnest were old and really thin. And some sympathisers wanted more done for the prisoners from up north, leaving the tropics sort of thing and coming down to here into the cold, and which was killing them.
Yeah.
And the jailers and that, Vincent was the worst one. They didn't care.
No.
And if the prisoners didn't do anything right, no food. They weren't allowed to eat.
Yeah.
And they were given bottles and that, the big bottles and all that. They're still all the artefacts are still there. All the chips of broken bottles everywhere are still up on the hill where the Telecom have got their Telstra have got their communication tower there, all around that. Anyway, that's where they used to make all beautiful spearheads and everything out of bottles, and that's how they used to get decent feed. They had to go down. Sundays was their day off, and they used to go. We're allowed to go fishing and hunting.
Yeah.
To get a decent. The only meat they got would have been fish and mussels or whatever they got off the rocks.
I'm hoping that lots of people were listening today and that they learnt a little bit about the very dark history of Australia.
Yeah.
This is only just a little bit.
Where are you from, Maureen?
Sorry?
Where are you from?
Myself?
Yeah.
I actually was born here, but my parents are actually Italian. And
okay.
But I have worked. I've done a lot of interviews with First Nations people over many years, and
okay.
I feel so angry about the way that with deaths in custody and also with the incarceration.
Yeah. Well, when back in the Government Hut said back in the early days that he didn't want any chains on them. But they didn't listen, and the chains were still on. They were still chained for another 120 years.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's one bloke from the Kimberleys. His name, they called him Captain. He was never to take. It was on his drum record that he was never to taken back to the Kimberleys. And they would walk they were walked from the north all the way down, like hundreds and hundreds of miles, just in chains, and then put on ships and brought down to the Rottnest, just for simple little charges, things, you know.
It's disgusting. It really is absolutely deplorable, Uncle. It's deplorable.
And
the
government groom, he closed the old cemetery in the 1800s to open another number 2 grave, but there was nothing put in the number 2 grave, and they still and the white graves have got little stones there, like headstones and that, and some of them haven't, but a lot of them have, and a lot of them were little white babies, you know, from the wives that went over with their husbands when they were working there, and there's a lot of little babies there, white babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the graves.
It's really horrible.
Yeah, some of the graves that they were never found.
I'm surprised Aboriginal people had graves.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by a grave is just a hole, and just put them in there and just left it, covered it up.
Of course. That's not a grave.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's not really a grave.
Yeah, and some of them were put in this. They built the first long rectangular rooms. They were 20 metres by 5 metres long. There was a fireplace at each end, and there were several cells down the end of one for the prisoners.
Absolutely. Now, Uncle, I better finish soon because I've only got a couple of minutes left, but it really was great to talk to you, and I'm wondering, can I call you sometimes and have you back on the show again sometime?
Well, yeah, and I just wondered, some of the cells were only 2 metres by 3 metres, and there were 4 to 5 people in the cell.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. How were they? Yeah.
A lot of genocidal policies.
Yeah, and in the first, say, 50 years or whatever, a lot of the times they only had cabbage leaves, and they added a bit of cereal in it, which was like a gruel. That's what they'd eat twice a day.
Yeah, that's really crazy. All right, Uncle, we're going to be finishing soon, but thank you very much for coming onto the show, and I'd like to have you back very soon.
Okay, thank you very much. All the best.
Say hello to your daughter, to Marianne McKay, for me, won't you?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Uncle.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So, here you are, too foreign for home, too foreign for here, never enough for both. Ijuoma Umebinyo, Diaspora Blues.
What makes you smile and adds a spring to your step? What does it mean to belong? And how do we build a home away from home?
Diaspora Blues is a show that contemplates what is and what could be. Join Busto and Bigwa every Monday at 2:30 on 3CR Community Radio.
Produced by Jan.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and I'm out of here now. Thank you to all our guests. And we're going out now with our theme song, Blackfella, Whitefella by the Rumpy Band. Stay tuned next Monday for International Women's Day. I'll be doing a show about Aboriginal women impacted by the criminal justice system. And tune in every day, every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. Bye.
We need more one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand?
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.